Hi everyone. I just thought it'd be quite a nice idea to talk a bit more about the immunity passport, which you guys were talking on. What made everyone bring their expertise into creating this project of the immunity passports?
We've spent 5 years in the blockchain team in KMI looking at certification for students and how decentralized platforms such as a blockchain and Solid can empower students to own their own academic certification data. Then when the pandemic occurred, we, like everyone, were thinking, how can we help? And we think there's not such a big jump from the existing platform we have around self-empowered certification for academic qualifications to the certifications required for this pandemic, which may be for antibody tests or for vaccinations, or maybe even to certify that one is a key worker.
This is not an immunity passport. So this is really, really very crucial. It's a nice label. It's not an immunity passport. All we are doing, which is quite significant, is we are certifying that the issuer is who they say they are, rather than some bogus pharmacist. The issuer is who they say they are. The holder of the certificate is who that holder says they are, and the test results are valid. The quantitative test results, like you have antibody of such and such a type and of such and such a level, what that means is a much bigger issue. It might confer immunity, it might not. You might have good enough results to let you in to be an Amazon delivery driver, but not to be an NHS health worker and so on. That's up to the particular context and the scientific evidence of the day. So it's a kind of a long-winded way of saying, oh, it's not immunity passport, but
Yeah,
that's a very loaded term, which has generated a lot of backlash.
So our goal is, because this is personal and maybe sensitive data, the test results that you have for some medical test, then we want you to be in complete control of that data. And so in fact, we use technology from Sir Tim Berners-Lee called Solid. And Tim has been complaining for a while that the web is over-centralized. So your personal data should be owned by you and should be controlled by you. So imagine that you have your personal data store and you can write anything in there, you can store anything in there. Now, the question immediately arises, how do we know you're telling the truth? So that's where the blockchain comes in. So the blockchain is a public ledger where you make a claim, like I've had this test, and someone can sign to say, yes, I agree that John or Mark or Mano had this test. And so what we do is we put the equivalent of a thumbnail called a hash onto the blockchain. So you make the statement, you have a certificate in your personal store in your favorite place. We put this thumbnail or hash on the blockchain with a signature from whoever carried out the test. So the blockchain is where anyone who wants to verify this can check on the blockchain that this certificate I'm showing you today is a genuine certificate and not one made up. But I own and control that certificate.
I'll just jump in here. That's another good question, but we have many ideas for how this approach can be used, because it is quite generally applicable. And one of the next cases for us is in a vaccination certificate, which oddly enough is almost an easier case because it's the exact same approach that you get. Instead of getting a test, you get a jab. And then that's another nice one to have a certificate issued for. Now, generalizing beyond that, it'd be nice to have your personal health records generally, your vaccine records stored. I've looked up my vaccination records while engaged in this very project, and it's an embarrassingly scruffy little sheet of paper. It's a crumpled old card from my GP, or from the GP surgery, with some scrawled notes on it. And even the famous the WHO International Certificate of Vaccination, which is required for certain things, it's a very scruffy document. So we're hoping that would be very important general usage. And there's another one, I don't know, John may want to talk about this, but there's the whole challenge of what happens when your blood test has to go off site, for example. You know, it might not be as simple as your pharmacist just does everything, or your GP surgery does everything. They may have to take a blood sample and send it off site to one of the new generation testing labs that have just been announced this week. That may take a couple of days. There's a whole issue about the, let's say, the chain of supply from the vaccine onwards, and how that can be verified on the blockchain. I don't know if you want to jump in on that, John.
Yeah, so one of the great things you can do on the blockchain, so it's good for recording things in an immutable fashion. It's an immutable ledger. So imagine that there is some sort of a blood is taken from someone and it goes out to a lab. Then to prevent fraud of all different sorts, you can record every stage of the journey. So you can record who was the person that took the blood sample. Were they a registered pharmacist? What was the location? Is that a registered pharmacy place? Okay, you can take the vial, the actual tube that they put the blood in, that could be registered. Then it's sent by post, which can be recorded. It goes to a testing lab. You can record which testing lab did it go to, which individual person carried out the test, what machines did they use, how they registered. So you have this whole evidence trail, which is recorded forever, again, to improve reliance and reliability. So say, for example, we may discover at some point in the future that this type of test is no longer valid, or there are some issues with this testing lab or this particular person. Then you can say, okay, all of the tests which have this in their trail are not as valid as they were. The other thing that we're considering with our partners that we're working with is what we call verifiable personal healthcare records. So imagine if you're in complete control and you own your complete personal healthcare record, but everything is signed and validated. So for example, if you fly somewhere in a particular region, you can just show them the parts that you want to show them, and then everything can be checked.
And that would be good in terms of security as well, because I know that a lot of people would be worried about where their information is going, but if you already own it,
exactly,
it helps with that. But
exactly.
Yeah.
And if you decide one day to opt out, you just delete all the information and nobody will ever know. So, yeah, so it's interesting. So there are many different things you can do around the certification. So one term that comes up in the community is the term of self-sovereignty. So people talk about self-sovereign identity. So we all have an identity, an online identity in this call, but for the most part, our identity is given to us either by our employer or by the place where we study or by a large tech company. We don't own it. So imagine if we could do the equivalent of writing on a piece of paper, my name is John Demang, and having people sign across that, and then keeping not just my healthcare records or my academic records, but everything. So I have all of my personal data for my entire life under my complete control. And then I just show different parts to people as and when required. And in fact, we've postulated in various academic papers, imagine when parents know that they're about to have a child, you could register that child for their own self-sovereign pod. And then all of the data in their learning goes into that. It's owned by the child, but it's the parents act as guardians for that. And then when the person becomes 16, ownership is signed over for them. This would also increase efficiency. So think about your address. Your address is very important. How many different companies and government agencies do you have to inform when you move? you have to tell your different utilities, your phone, your internet provider, your employer, maybe different companies. I heard a statistic once that when someone dies, at least 50 government agencies need to be informed. That's just inefficient. So imagine if everything personal was controlled by that person, and then the different organizations would contact them. So we have this thread of research around what we call a self-sovereign world. The transfer of the ownership and control for that, and advocacy. There are different people that may have issues, either too young or too old, or there may be a different way that they can control. So then you would have something like a data advocate. So someone that acts on your behalf for your personal data.